So let's begin this presentation today with basic definitions. Definitions exist for a reason. Words have meanings. And let's break down some basic definitions of terms that will be used throughout this presentation. So when we talk about anarchy, what do we actually mean? What is meant by anarchy for the duration of this presentation? The English word anarchy is derived from the Greek prefix an. They're written in Greek print, in parentheses there. And the prefix an means without, the absence of, not present. And then the second part of the word anarchy comes from the Greek noun archon. They're written in Greek in parentheses there, in Greek characters. And archon means ruler or master in ancient Greek. So when we put these together, we arrive at the term anarchon, the absence of rulers, the absence of masters, without rulers, without masters. Anarchy does not mean without rules. Those who think that it means without rules or anything goes do not know what real anarchy is. Anarchy as a word literally means, from its etymological origins, without rulers. So anarchy means no rulers, no masters, or in other words, the state of true freedom, where one is not ruled by others through violence, coercion, or duress. And that is, in fact, what I call the real-world definition of anarchy. The real-world definition is a state of existence in which individuals are not ruled or enslaved by others and are free to exercise their natural rights unrestrained by violence, duress, or coercion. This state of human existence, the state of existence in general, can only be created and maintained via behavioral alignment to objective morality through a deep understanding of natural law. So, most people will not give you this anarchy, even in the anarchist community. Will not give you this definition, even within the anarchist community or the freedom community, because they don't understand how anarchy is created. They don't understand, in other words, how true freedom, which is what anarchy is created in our world. So as I said there, the state of anarchy can only be created and maintained via behavioral alignment to objective morality, meaning choosing and aligning one's behavior with actions which do not initiate harm to other sentient beings. And you can only do that through a deep understanding of natural law. So the real-world definition of anarchy is that freedom can only be created when the population behaves in a moral capacity. Morality is the actual dynamic that creates freedom. That is what anarchy really is. If we're being honest with ourselves and if we are correct, and we have the correct definition, that is the correct definition of what anarchy really is. It's not just the state whereby people are not ruled. It is the state by people are not ruled because they have aligned their behavior to objective morality under natural law, because they themselves understand the dynamic that morality is what creates freedom. That is my definition of anarchy, and that is the correct definition of anarchy. That is what anarchy actually is in the realm of nature. In the real world, matter-of-fact realm of nature, that is what anarchy is and how it operates, whether anyone understands it or agrees with that definition or not. That is the definition of what anarchy actually is. So when we're talking about natural law, what do we mean by that statement? Well, first, it doesn't mean Darwinism. It doesn't mean survival of the fittest. It doesn't mean the natural order as postulated by Darwinism and those who think like that, as a dog-eat-dog world. That is not what natural law is. So what is natural law as we are talking about it here in this presentation? Natural law is a set of universal, inherent, objective, non-man-made, eternal and immutable conditions which govern the consequences of behaviors of beings with the capacity for understanding the difference between harmful and non-harmful behavior. Yes, that's a mouthful. But if we take it in turn, universal means everywhere existent in the universe. Inherent means it is in nature. It is not created by anything that is done by human beings or any other beings. It is inherent to nature. It is objective. meaning it is not subjective and open to interpretation or open to whether we want to believe in it or not. It is not open to our opinion or whim. It is objective. It exists external to perception. It is non-man-made. It's not created by humanity. It exists because creation exists. It exists inherently in the universe. It exists as part of nature. It is eternal. It can never be out of effect. It has been in effect since the beginning of the universe, and it will be in effect for as long as the universe exists. And it is immutable. These conditions are immutable, these laws. That means that they can never be changed by anyone or anything. Any process that anyone tries to undertake, they can never be changed because they are set in place by creation itself. So that's what we're talking about. And these conditions govern the consequences of behaviors. They are the laws of behavioral consequence, karmic laws, cosmic universal moral laws, the laws of God, whatever you want to word it as. You can word it any way you want, but that is what they are. They are the laws that govern the behavioral consequences of the behaviors that we as human beings choose. They apply to beings with the capacity for understanding the difference between right and wrong, the difference between harmful and non-harmful behaviors. The understanding of natural law is centered upon bringing our own conscience, our knowledge of the objective difference between right and wrong behavior, into alignment with objective morality, the objective difference between behaviors which do initiate harm to other sentient beings and those which do not initiate harm to other sentient beings. So this means definitively knowing which behaviors are which behaviors are rights because they do not initiate harm to others, and which behaviors are wrongdoings, are transgressions against natural law because they do initiate harm to other sentient beings. This is what we mean by what natural law is and how it operates in the world, and why it is so important that human beings know what natural law is and the difference between harmful and non-harmful behavior. If we don't have that as a framework of knowledge under our belt, we can never create true freedom, because true freedom is hinged upon behaving in harmony with natural law, behaving in harmony with objective morality. That is what creates freedom. So this is the natural law of freedom, as I call it. When human beings in the aggregate, meaning in the collective sense as a species, live in harmony with natural law and are therefore moral, they become and remain free. When human beings in the aggregate live in opposition to natural law and are therefore immoral, they become and remain enslaved. I personally refer to this dynamic of natural law as the law of freedom. Or in other words, as aggregate morality increases, aggregate freedom increases. And as aggregate morality declines, freedom declines. The aggregate freedom of the whole species declines as aggregate morality declines. This is how natural law functions in the real world. This is a real-world definition of the law of freedom and how it works in our world. Most anarchists do not understand this. Most human beings do not understand this and refuse to accept it. And that's why we're in the situation that we're in as a species. That's why we're going into total tyranny and abject slavery. Right versus wrong is the entire crux of the matter. So a right, as we defined it in the last slide, is an action that does not initiate harm to another sentient being. True anarchy can only manifest when whole populations align their behavior to natural law, the universal moral laws of creation. Therefore, anarchy can only be created through a correct understanding of objective morality. If you do not understand objective morality, you cannot create the state of anarchy. It is an impossibility. Right behavior is also that which is correct. That is why it is so important to get it right, to be correct about our definitions and our understanding about these dynamics. Right does not just mean moral, it means correct as in based in truth, that it is not incorrect, that it is not wrong, as an answer. Okay? You know, when asked the right question, you want to get the answer correct. This is the exact same thing. This is why we are talking about it. It is so important to have the correct answer about what generates freedom. So right not only means moral, it means correct. And of course, as we've already talked about, it means moral in the sense that actions which are in harmony with natural law, because they are rights, do not initiate harm to other sentient beings, whereas if we are wrong, both incorrect, not having the correct answer, not being based in truth, our actions will go awry and become immoral actions, which are in opposition to natural law because they do initiate harm to other sentient beings. For more information on natural law, the law of freedom, the difference between right and wrong, the transgressions against natural law, questions about any given behavior, I highly recommend people check out my natural law seminar. Obviously, we can't repeat the whole seminar here today. I have to give the basics, as working definitions before we move on into further material. But if you want to look further into natural law, I did a close to 9-hour seminar on the topic called Natural Law, the Real Law of Attraction, and How to Apply It in Your Life. And if you haven't seen that, you absolutely need to. That is my magnum opus. That is the absolute heart of all of my work. Okay, so let's move on to what it means to be an anarchist in name only. And this is very important. I gave a presentation called Fake Ass Christians back in 2017, which I'll be mentioning, that talked about what is a Christian in name only. It's somebody that is pretending to be something. They're inauthentic. They're a fake. They're saying one thing, but then their behavior betrays what they're saying that they are. So let's look at this dynamic, because I don't think many people really understand when you use the term in name only what you mean. The phrase in name only means not the real thing. Many people may have heard this in political circles, Republicans in name only, Democrats in name only. I used it in the sense of Christians using the term in name only, and here I'm using it to mean anarchists in name only. There are people who are wearing a mask, as seen in the depiction there. Anyone can claim to be something, but in reality, if that person's thoughts and behaviors do not align with what they claim to be, they're most certainly not what they claim to be. They are, in fact, inauthentic beings. They are fakes. They are frauds. But sadly, most people fail to understand this dynamic or recognize that it is taking place in just about every aspect of human life. Just because someone says that they are something, and then maybe they want to take the symbols of that, movement or that dynamic or that philosophy and use it as their own, doesn't mean they're that thing. Anybody can slap an A in a circle on themselves, call themselves an anarchist, and not be an anarchist. Just like anyone can hang a Christian cross pendant around their neck and not represent what Christianity is supposed to represent. The same is true for anarchists and anarchy in general. So just because someone says they're something doesn't automatically make them that, nor should we trust that they are that. Again, by your deeds you shall know them. That's the whole point. Understand what people are behaving like. That is what they are. That is what they are bringing forth and manifesting in the world. They're manifesting the world through their behaviors, not what they say they are. Okay? So that's very important to keep this in mind as we step through the presentation. To understand, these are people just claiming that they're anarchists. Even they may believe that they are, but they do not have the correct understanding of anarchy in their own minds. And so their behaviors are going to go awry and go askew, and often even be immoral. Okay? And they could advocate for immoral things. And that is because they are claiming to be something, but they don't even in their own minds often have the correct definition. That's why that definition section at the beginning of this presentation is so important to get correct. And those are the correct definitions. Okay? It's not my opinion about the definitions of those things. That's how they really are in the real world of nature, and that's how they really work in the natural domain. So moving forward, we're talking about people who just are using the word anarchy, basically. They're using the word in an incorrect capacity, and then they'll even use the symbol in an incorrect capacity, which is one of the reasons I say we need to take back the word anarchy, and we need to take back the symbol of anarchy, and we need to apply it to what it really means. Not what other idiots out there are claiming that it means, and living a completely inauthentic life, with a mask on, pretending to be something that they are absolutely not, that they don't even understand in most cases. So again, I gave a presentation back in 2017 called Fake Ass Christians, where I exposed people who are Christian in name only and claim to be Christian, yet they're not really living the words of Jesus in the New Testament. They're not living any type of authentic Christian life. They're just claiming to be Christian. I call it churchianity. It's one of the terms I applied to it in this presentation, or Constantinianity, after Emperor Constantine, who unified Christianity under, the banner of the Roman Empire. Again, anybody can call themselves anything. There's Freemasons in name only. Okay? There's Rosicrucians in name only. There's Kabbalists in name only and occultists in name only. They don't really have the core principles. They don't have the core philosophy down, but they call themselves whatever they want to call themselves, even though they don't understand it fully and live it fully. The same is true for anarchists. So let's talk about who the fake-ass anarchists are. Now, I am going to delve into, in this presentation, the types of hyphenated anarchy, but not as much as you might think. Okay? This presentation, one, is going to be a significant amount of review of philosophy, of morality, of natural law, and helping people to understand why this is so important to understand it, get it right, and really apply that to anarchy. That's the core philosophy of real anarchy. But I am going to spend a little bit of time on the fake anarchist factions. It is important enough to at least understand what the factions are, what they call themselves, and what their basic ideologies are. However, I am not going to delve into their, to a great extent, into their 3D worldly philosophies. What I'm really going to get into is what their whole psychological makeup and their ideologies that go even beyond political ideologies really are. Okay? I'm going to go into what has completely led them askew and astray of real anarchy. All the ways that they are under mind control. All the ways that their thought process is actually leading them into a deeper state of bondage and enslavement instead of toward real freedom, which is what they claim they want. So this section is called, in double quotes, anarchist factions, and hyphenated, and in double quotes, anarchism. Okay? Because they're not really these things. They just claim that they're these things. So let's look at some different categories of anarchists. I'm not going to take the time to break down totally slide by slide each separate faction. I'm kind of grouping them into what I consider large categories of factions. Okay, so first and foremost, you have the left-wing anarchists. These are the most prominent of the fake anarchists, at least among the community of people who sort of does really understand what anarchism and anarchy really is all about. This is like the most popular aspect of fake anarchy, the left-wing branch of so-called anarchism. It's not anarchy, folks. It's not anarchism. This is anarchism wrapped in double quotes. Please wrap it in a healthy dosage of double quotes, okay? So the examples, and as I've also, even in their names, like anarcho-communism, anarcho-syndicalism, etc., I am wrapping the word anarcho in double quotes to express this is a completely false representation of what anarchy is. So some examples of the left-wing factions of anarchy are anarcho-communism, anarcho-syndicalism, black bloc anarchists, so-called anarchists, and of course the ever-present and popular Antifa, standing for anti-fascism, anti-fascist, which they're nothing of the sort either. So some of the ideologies of these types of left-wing anarchist factions include, but are not limited to, the following ideologies: Marxism, socialism, communism, and going hand in hand with those, the abolition of capitalism, the abolition of private property, the abolition of wage labor, so-called collective ownership. I put ownership in double quotes because if something is collective ownership, it's not owned. Only the person who is deciding what can be done with property is the actual owner. So you can't really have collective ownership. But they want collective ownership of the means of production of goods and services. which really means you're handing it to the state at any given time. Collective ownership would be mob rule mentality. And this is often the mentality of leftists in general, certainly of so-called left-wing anarchism. Overall, all of these different factions or categories of anarchists that I'm going to be talking about here today, they believe that something is the problem that isn't really the problem. They just believe that in their own minds. They have this thing that they attack, that they want destroyed, that they want abolished from the world, and they believe that abolishing it will create true freedom. Well, in the left-wing fake anarchist faction, they believe that capitalism is the real problem and that abolishing capitalism will create true freedom. It's a ridiculous ideology. It's based in things that are actual slavery and totalitarian leading ideologies that lead to total control over a whole society, lead to totalitarianism like Marxism, communism, socialism, etc. And they don't have an understanding of rights. They identify themselves, as Marx tried to identify human beings with, as workers. Imagine this is your life's goal. This is what you want to identify yourself as. And we're going to talk about identification, identity politics, identity personalities, just pure ego identification of identifying with a role or with a group. And they're poster children for that dynamic. And once again, anybody identifying on this side of anarchy, get as offended as you like by what I'm saying here. You can get as offended as you like. It's still not going to make what I'm saying untrue. Conversely, I'm going to go and start to attack the right-wing factions of anarchy next. They could feel as equally free to get as offended as they like. What I'm going to say about that will also be true, and you could get as offended about it as you want, and it will never make it untrue. So, this stems out of left-wing partisan politics, and these people believe that they've transcended that, yet they've adopted some of the same mentalities, ideologies, political thoughts that have basically led to the decimation of whole populations and the genocide of over 200 million people in the last century alone. But they want to believe that they're accurate and they've identified with something that is good and pure and wholesome. They'll never be it'll never be true. They'll never be correct about it. But yet, they have bought into it. They've made it their identity. And part of what I'm going to talk about here today is admission that you're wrong about something. Most people in any of these factions are never going to want to do that. They want to insist that they're correct and they got it and they learned all the information they need to know. And let me tell you something, little boys and girls, you don't have enough information. You got off the train before it even left the station when information is concerned, okay? You think you have the world figured out. You don't have anything figured out. You have a little pissant droplet in the bucket, okay? That's what you got, all right? Your little children in your mentality thinking that Marx is some kind of a savior when he's leading you into a total cage. That's what's really going on. You're being groomed for bondage and groomed for chattel slavery. Okay? Because you think you have it figured out. You think you studied enough. You think you learned the answers. You didn't learn shit. Okay? You're still little children that haven't even gotten past the preface of the book, let alone read the whole thing. Let's put it that way. And you have a lot to learn and a lot of growing to do to understand how it really works. Because your spiritual children, your spiritual infants in your understanding of how things really work in the real world. Infants. And you can't admit that to yourself. You can't admit that you don't have enough information. It's part of the dynamic I'm going to talk about later. But these people identify with left-wing factions like socialism and communism and actually believe those are good things. They actually believe that concentrating the production of goods and services into the hands of the state or into the hands of the collective, as they claim, is somehow going to lead to freedom. Private property, private means of production, free markets, that to them, that's anathema, and that's what they want to abolish. And they actually believe that'll lead to freedom. Believe it or not, some of those people are so dumb, they actually believe that will lead to true freedom. As fake as the day is long, ladies and gentlemen, you know. But good luck telling them that, you know. They don't want to hear it, they don't want to listen. They want to believe that they're right, and they want to play grown-up when in fact they're infants. You know, here's some more people who have gone a little bit further in their understanding, but not all the way. This is close but no cigar. You know, set up the tent 3/4 of the way up the mountain and forget reaching the summit. Right-wing anarchism. Some examples, and again, this I'm not talking about any just one faction. These are general breakdowns of categories of so-called anarchists. And again, if people thought that I was going to go easy on the ANCAPs, think again, because they don't have the understanding down either. They think that they do, and they have a long way to go in their understanding. So, you know, some of the, anarcho factions here are anarcho-capitalism, voluntarism, agorism, etc. Their ideologies include free market economics, voluntary interaction, and freedom of association. And not that those things are bad, all right? That's a good start. I basically believe in those things as well. I don't identify with these groups. You know, one could call me a voluntarist, but I'm not talking about the voluntarist in the political sense that a lot of the people who identify with these groups and symbols do, because I understand that natural law is the only way that true freedom can be created. Not just voluntary interaction alone. A deep understanding of natural law as inherent to creation and as really the laws of creation and the laws of God, if you will. So they believe free markets and voluntary interaction alone will create true freedom. I think it involves much more than that. I call this ideology close but no cigar. You got some of the basic things right, like the non-aggression principle, free markets, voluntary interaction. You got that right? But I call this the close but no cigar factions of anarchism, because natural law and spirituality is almost always left out of the discussion. Okay? They leave natural law and spirituality out of the discussion because they don't want to sound like they're a religion. Natural law isn't a religion. Spirituality isn't a religion. You can be spiritual and religionless. You can understand natural law and be religionless. I consider natural law a science of morality, not a religion. So a lot of these groups are also atheistic and materialistic, purely political, purely financial. That's why they don't get it all the way. They're not real anarchists, in my opinion, and in my definition, I would not group these people as real anarchists. As difficult as that may be for some people out in the listening audience to hear, and as much as you might get offended at that statement, then go right ahead and get as offended as you want. It's still true. This isn't real anarchy. It's very close to what real anarchy is, but it misses the mark, because the people who subscribe to these, because they are secular, worldly, materialistic, only want to talk about financial and political power. They never want to talk about natural law and true spirituality. And that's why they're never going to get to an understanding of how real freedom is generated. They don't understand the generative principle. They don't understand aligning one's conscience with natural laws of morality is the only path to freedom. And that can sound dogmatic. You could say I'm dogmatic about that all you want. But guess what? Gravity works a certain way. Electromagnetism works a certain way. All the laws of nature and dynamics work a certain way, and so do the laws that govern behavior of human beings. They work a certain way, and there's either knowing it or not knowing it. You have either identified how the dynamic operates and you know it, or you don't know how the dynamic operates and you're ignorant of it. Those who know it can align their behavior to it and get the result that they want if enough people do that, and those who don't know it, whatever reason they're ignorant of it for, they are going to continue to create unconsciously and get results that they do not want. That is how it really works in the real world, and right-wing anarchism is just as guilty as any other factions. So, sorry to burst people's bubble on that, but what I just said there is the truth. And you got to look into it way deeper than the levels that you're looking into this as just a political and financial, mechanism. You're just analyzing the political and financial machinations. You're never going to get to the heart or the crux of what's really going on by looking there. You got to get to the spiritual heart of it. You got to get to the moral heart of it. If you don't get to those levels of understanding and understanding these are laws that are set forth by a higher power than humanity, you're never going to understand the dynamics that generate true freedom. You'll get close. It'll be like a religion. This will be almost like some traditional religious dogma that can get people to a basic understanding of morality, or they'll be like the kind of people that are like, I treat people nice and kindly and don't do bad things to people because Jesus said so, right? This is like that to what religion is to real morality, right? To a real understanding of natural law, one needs no religion if one has a deep, real understanding of natural law, okay? This is like the anarchists that are like the Christians who say, I won't do bad and evil things just because I don't want to go to hell, right? They have a very rudimentary understanding of basic morality, but it's lacking in many ways. And the same is true for a lot of these groups, sadly. Not all of them. Some people within these groups get it, but they're just still identifying with the group dynamic of hyphenated anarchy, instead of understanding there's only anarchy with no hyphenations that is based on natural law. There is nothing else other than that in nature. All of these things I'm explaining here in this factions section, these are just constructs that exist in the mind. These are groupings and constructs that exist only in the human mind. The form of anarchy that I'm talking about, that I defined in the definition section, that one exists in nature. That's the real state of existence that exists within the natural world that we want to get back to. There really is the only true state of nature that human beings should be living in. Yet we have created the illusion, through the illusion of our belief in authority, we have created slavery for ourselves instead of the freedom that is the natural state called anarchy, of no rulers. Let's move on to the next faction, or category I really should call this. These are categories of fake-ass anarchists. I call this category the left-brained anarchists. This is left-brained anarchism. Some of the examples of the left-brained anarchists are anarcho-egoism, anarcho-transhumanism. Yes, there is such a thing. Their ideologies include, but are not limited to, pure egotism, might makes right mentality, Newtonian materialism, transhumanism, and many other ideologies. Replacing parts of human beings with technology like a cyborg. They are driven by scientism and left-brain imbalance. So here the dynamic that I'm really talking about is these are left-brain imbalanced people. They are people who are completely trapped in ego mentality, in physical world identification, in might makes right mentality, in materialism, in secularism, and in pure, total technology used in an out of control way for purposes that it is not intended. So they are driven by that type of left brain imbalance. They often display a lack of morality and almost entirely display a lack of spirituality, a total lack of spirituality. These different left brain factions, regardless of what they are, believe that either selfishness and or technology will create true freedom. See, there's always something that needs to go and then something that needs to be fostered, right? So like in the left wing factions, political left-wing factions think that capitalism needs to go and shared ownership needs to be implemented of everything, right? This left-brain anarchist faction believe that selfishness is going to get us there. Replacing humanity with technology is going to get us there to true freedom. Human beings basically need to go to the wayside and technology needs to replace them. That's the anarcho-transhumanist mentality. The anarcho-egoism is, it's all just purely egoic and individual identifying, and nothing is above the self. There are no laws higher than the self. Everything is just toward the self, me, me, me. And it's my rights because I say it is this way. It's ridiculous. Anarcho-egoism could be called Satanism. For all intents and purposes, it's basically the same mentality. And that's not going to get you to true freedom. That's going to get you exactly where we're at now, in a cage, in a world of slavery and bondage. Living a life that's purely egoic like that. Let's move on. So now we have the right-brained factions of anarchism. Converse to the left-brained factions, these people are highly in right-brain imbalance in their mentality and ideologies. Some examples include, but are not limited to, anarcho-primitivism and anarcho-pacifism. And, I just like left-brained factions of anarchy, I completely am in disagreement with the right-brained factions. They're as equally imbalanced and equally wrong. There's no less shortage of being incorrect about how freedom is generated, what needs to go, what needs to stay. They're all just completely wrong. That's the whole problem. You didn't you didn't follow through the logical steps of the trivium process enough to get it actually right, figure out what does create true freedom, and then align yourself to that truth. You just followed through with what you already thought was going on in your own head, and then you bought into the faction that, pleased your pre-existing thoughts and whims. That's how this often works. Okay? So, their ideologies include, but are not limited to total rejection of technology, the abolition of all land ownership, and the rejection of the self-defense principle, as is the case with anarcho-pacifism, which I consider a completely deplorable ideology. Self-defense is one of the two pillars of natural law understanding. It's one of the two pillars of true spirituality. You can't understand the non-aggression principle and not understand the self-defense principle if you really want to get both of them right. Non-aggression principle is do not initiate harm to other sentient beings. The self-defense principle is when harm is initiated against yourself or others, you have the right to defend yourself with physical force up to and including deadly force to stop that aggression. Very simple, absolutely true principles that cannot be left at the door and you can't not understand them in their fullness if you're going to be a true anarchist. They have to be deeply understood in their completeness and fullness, the two pillars of enlightenment, which are the two pillars of anarchy, the non-aggression principle and the self-defense principle. Those are the pillars of natural law. And again, these people in these factions of right-brained anarchism, so-called, believe that technology and or self-defense must be abolished to create true freedom. So to them, living in nature without any technology is the answer, and technology is the enemy, that's the devil, and that's what must be abolished. In the case of the anarcho-pacifists, any physical use of force is the enemy and must be abolished, including defensive force. They would never lift a finger to defend themselves, even if a, conscienceless, ruthless enemy were at the gates, And that's a completely deplorable self-loathing ideology. That both of these things stem from being too in the right brain. Not enough balance in left and right brain hemispheres. These people are completely in the right brain, don't want any technology and or won't stand up for themselves. So you could see how different forms of imbalance lead people into different factions. The right brain go into factions like this, the left brain go into transhumanist and egoist, and then the left and right wing political factions, they break down the same way based on brain imbalance. It's all imbalance within the self. Speaking of which, let's look at the next one, which is what I call no-brained anarchism. Well, we had left brain and right brain. This is what I call no-brain anarchism because these people are total fucking idiots. Okay? These are people who think that anarchy means chaos. They're people who bought into the notion that the PSYOP mainstream media told them anarchy means chaos. And then they believe that's a good thing. Okay? Because they don't want to be ruled by other people. And they actually believe we should just have chaos. They're nihilists. They're little spiritual infantile children is what they really are. So the example are nihilist anarchists, people who believe in nothing and are proud of that. You know, oh, I represent nothing. I believe in nothing. It's just all everything's here for that is everything is purposeless. The universe is purposeless. There is no point in even believing in anything. I mean, what a fool's mentality. What a child. It's a child. It's not a man's mentality. It's not a woman's mentality. It's a little bratty child with their arms crossed like that. That's what this really is. That's what almost really all of these anarchist factions are. It's really the hallmarks of people who never grew up into actual psychological human adulthood. Human psychological adulthood. They never got there. That's what it really is. Okay? And people will be like, "Oh, you're calling people names, Mark." Yeah, I'm calling them names because that's what they deserve. Anybody this stupid to believe that anarchy is chaos at this point in the year 2021 and still identifying with that and thinking it's a good thing and thinking you're going to get real freedom like that is a fucking idiot. It's not just me being mean or condescending. It's those things too, but if they really are idiots, they really are mentally challenged human beings. And I'm not here to be nice to people, Part of psychological adulthood is understanding the truth and speaking it. It isn't necessarily being super nice to everybody when they're an idiot and they're affecting other people's lives for the negative. That's the whole problem, is that too many people don't want to tell people, you're just an idiot, you got to rethink it, you haven't thought it through well enough to come to the correct answer. And that's what it really is. And often it's because these people have no parenting. They had shit for parents, absolute shit for parenting, or they had no parents. And they never had a mentor. They never studied enough to really develop a mentor, like an author as a mentor or a presenter as a mentor. And they just had no good way showing, Absolutely nobody really took them under their wing ideologically, philosophically, and showed them the way, showed them the correct way, the correct path. That's why people think like this. So some examples are nihilists and what's called anarcho-immoralists. Anarcho-immorality. Yes, there's such a thing. Look it up. Their ideologies include rejection of the non-aggression principle. Yeah, that'll get you to true freedom. That's great. No, that's exactly what's going on now. That's what we have now in the world. That's why we're enslaved now. Because of the rejection of the non-aggression principle. The ideology of the ends justifies the means. The total rejection of morality, nihilism, and in the embrace of chaos. I mean, imagine how completely mentally challenged people would have to be to believe this. And to believe this is anarchy and then call it anarcho, hyphenated, whatever. They're spiritually stunted children. And this state is really pretty much what we have now. We have the total rejection of the non-aggression principle, ends justifies the means, rejection of morality, chaos. That's what we have now, really. This is the mentality of the rulers of the world. And then these idiots burning down property actually believe they're going to get freed up from the occultists who run the world. Yeah, you're going to be free of them with their mentality at a lower scale. They're ultra high level geniuses operating with this mentality, and you're total fucking idiots operating down here with this level of mentality, but you're going to be free from them. Sure you are. But this imbecilism pretty much sums up the current human condition. This is what idiots out there believe. They're just as big of idiots as people who are hardcore, rabid, religious statists. It's just the opposite end of the spectrum. That's all it is. And finally, we have what I call those who have sold their soul anarchism. And they're not anarchists at all. They're actually who I just mentioned. People who have totally given their heart and mind over to the state, but then wear a costume and then an anarchist badge, an A in a circle badge, and say, I'm an anarchist, and then they go out and destroy property as an agent provocateur. So these are agent provocateurs, or in other words, what I call them, low-life cops with trash for parents. Low-life cops with a scumbag, rotten, low-life set of parents. Who never taught them morality, who never taught them the difference between right and wrong, who sat them down in front of the television and let the TV raise them, and they became a crooked cop. A scumbag with no morality. Their ideology is government and money are my gods, so I'll do anything, no matter how low or immoral, to serve them. I'll go out in the middle of the anarchist group, so-called anarchist faction that's protesting, and I'll throw some bricks or a chair or a bench through a window of a corporate business to try to make the anarchists in the street look bad and look like they're people who just destroy property randomly. That's all agent provocatoring it is. You pick your political opponent. You say, who does the chief want us to go and give a bad name to today? That's all they give a damn about, And then they'll go out on the street and cause chaos. And it's called agent provocatoring. It's a French term that basically means you're pretending to be your political enemy, and then you're doing behaviors that make them look horrible so that they can be politically attacked, and you could make them look bad. You're destroying their reputation. You're demonizing them. These kind of people are who I call pure evil in human flesh, the lowest form of consciousness in the known universe, according to me. There's nothing lower than a cop to begin with. Let alone you put a cop in a uniform pretending to be an anarchist, following his orders from his higher ups to destroy other people's property, just to get that tag placed on anarchy so that the public through the mainstream media believes that this is what anarchists do. When this isn't what anarchists do. Making presentations like this is what anarchists do, to expose this and present the truth. That's what a real anarchist does.